What if Mars wasn't always a dry, silent rock in the sky? What if billions of years ago, it looked more like Earth, with oceans, clouds, maybe even cities glowing in the dusk? Crazy, right? But every mystery starts with a what if. So tonight, as you settle in and let your thoughts drift, we're going to travel to the red planet. Not the dead world you've seen in photos, but the living one it might have been. A Mars that breathed, that dreamed, that maybe, just maybe, had neighbors looking up at our planet the way we look up at theirs. Let's find out what really happened, or at least, what might have. Before we jump into the deep end of space theories, let's set the stage. Here are the big three questions we'll wander through tonight. Did intelligent life ever exist on Mars? If it did, what proof might still be hiding beneath that red dust? And the wild one, could we be their descendants? Now, I'm not saying little green Martians built pyramids and then flew here for a vacation. But science has found hints that Mars was once warm, wet, and possibly alive. So grab your imaginary space blanket. This is the story of a planet that might have had its own golden age long before Earth learned to spin properly on its axis. And remember, this isn't a lecture, it's a bedtime adventure. You don't need a degree in astrophysics, just a comfy pillow and a bit of curiosity. Let's start our journey. If you looked at Mars through a telescope right now, you'd see a lonely desert. A world that's been through way too much. Cold winds race across endless plains, dust storms wrap the planet in orange fog, and the temperature could freeze your Wi-Fi signal solid. But Mars wasn't always this quiet. Billions of years ago, it might have been downright cozy, or at least, cozy for Mars. Scientists say it once had rivers. Real rivers, winding through canyons deeper than anything on Earth. There were maybe even lakes and a northern ocean the size of the Arctic. Imagine waves lapping at rusty shores under a salmon-colored sky. If you could stand there back then, you'd hear the soft sound of water moving through red sand. You'd see clouds drifting lazily overhead. And somewhere nearby, volcanoes taller than Mount Everest would rumble like sleepy giants. That's not science fiction, that's science's best guess from the clues we've found. The Mars rovers, Spirit, Opportunity, Curiosity, Perseverance, have all played cosmic detectives. They found pebbles shaped by running water, minerals that only form when rocks sit in lakes, and patterns that scream, "Hey, there used to be rain here." There are dried-up river deltas, craters that once held ponds, and chemical whispers of salt left behind when those waters disappeared. It's kind of heartbreaking, actually. Mars looks like a photo album of good times long gone. So what happened? How does a planet go from blue to brown? The leading idea is that Mars lost its atmosphere, slowly, like air leaking from a forgotten balloon. Its magnetic field fizzled out, and without that shield, the solar wind from the sun stripped the air away. No air meant no pressure. No pressure meant no liquid water. The oceans boiled off into space, and whatever life might have been splashing around had to make other plans. Maybe it went underground. Maybe it froze. Or maybe it just vanished with the tides. Still, that thought, that Mars once had a climate where you could, in theory, breathe with a little help, makes the planet feel less alien and more like a distant cousin who just made some bad life choices. Every time we look up at Mars now, we're seeing the after picture. The wrinkles, the scars, the desert leftovers of something ancient. If Mars had a diary, every crater would be an entry. Dear Journal, still windy today. Miss my oceans. Humor aside, those craters are time capsules. Some of them are so old, they've been around since Earth was still getting smacked by space rocks the size of mountains. That's how ancient this planet's story really is. So why does this matter to us, sitting here on a blue world full of life and coffee shops? Because Mars is a mirror. It shows us what happens when a planet loses balance. It reminds us how fragile air, water, and warmth can be. And, maybe, it teases the idea that we're not the first ones to wonder where we came from. There's a kind of poetic symmetry to it, like an older sibling who didn't make it but left clues for us to find. When NASA's rovers drive across those ancient plains, they're not just doing geology. They're flipping through pages of cosmic history, trying to figure out if someone wrote in the margins long before we learned to write. If Mars ever had life, it's been hiding for a very, very long time. And yet, there's something hauntingly familiar about it. The valleys, the mountains, the polar ice caps, it almost feels like home. Maybe that's why humans keep staring at it. Maybe deep down, we recognize something there. Could be just imagination. Could be memory. Who knows? So tonight, as you drift towards sleep, picture that young Mars, skies tinted gold, waves shimmering under twin moons, maybe even lights glowing faintly on the horizon. Was it lightning? Was it life? We can't say for sure. But the evidence, the whispers, and the dreams all point to one truth. Mars wasn't always dead. It lived, it breathed, and perhaps it remembered. Next time, we'll dive beneath those ancient skies and explore Chapter 2, Oceans Beneath Crimson Skies. But for now, close your eyes. The Red Planet story is just beginning. Imagine standing on ancient Mars, not the dry, cracked world we see now, but a place alive with motion. The air is thin but breathable enough. The ground isn't dust and stone, but clay and grass like moss. And in the distance, waves, rolling gently under a pink sky. Hard to picture, right? Mars, with beaches. But that's where the science points, and the story begins. Billions of years ago, Mars had what scientists call a hydrosphere, a fancy way of saying it had water just about everywhere. Rivers carved long, winding channels through valleys. There were lakes that filled craters, maybe even waterfalls tumbling down cliffs taller than any on Earth. If you were flying over Mars back then, you might have mistaken it for a rusty version of early Earth. Clouds drifting, storms brewing, and the sun casting soft red light over rolling waves. The northern hemisphere of Mars, what's now a huge plain called the northern lowlands, might once have been a giant ocean. Not a puddle, not a lake, an actual sea. Some scientists even call it Oceanus Borealis. Sounds fancy, but it just means the Northern Ocean. They estimate it covered almost 1/3 of the planet. That's like if everything north of Mexico, Europe, and most of Asia was ocean. So yes, once upon a time, Mars had beaches. You could have dipped your toes in the water, though you might have wanted a spacesuit with sunscreen. We know this not because we've seen waves, but because of the clues left behind. Rovers like Curiosity and Perseverance have rolled across old riverbeds and found pebbles, round and smooth, the kind that only form when water tumbles them over and over again. We've found clay minerals that form in standing water. We've found dried-up deltas, where rivers once fanned out into lakes. And orbiters looking down from space can see patterns in the soil that match ancient shorelines. One scientist even compared them to bathtub rings. You know, that faint line left after the water drains? Mars has that, but planet-sized. But here's the heartbreaker. Those oceans are gone. completely gone. Well, almost. Some of the water might still be locked up as ice under the poles or deep underground, frozen for billions of years like a time capsule. But most of it just vanished. How? It's a cosmic mystery, but we've got a pretty good idea. When Mars lost its magnetic field, that invisible shield protecting it from solar radiation, the sun's charged particles began stripping away the atmosphere bit by bit. Without a thick blanket of air, the surface pressure dropped, and water couldn't stay liquid anymore. It boiled away or froze instantly. Imagine watching your oceans fade into mist. One day, waves crash on the shore. A few thousand years later, there's only red sand and silence. That's what happened to Mars. Even crazier? There's evidence that Mars once had rain. Yep, actual rainfall. Light drizzle under copper-colored clouds. Scientists have found erosion patterns that suggest rain once flowed down slopes, pooling in basins and lakes. If you're imagining Martian kids jumping into puddles, well, maybe hold that thought. But seriously, the idea that Mars had a water cycle, clouds, rain, rivers, oceans, makes it feel less like a stranger and more like an ancient version of home. Some models even suggest Mars had seasons like ours. Winds, snow, ice caps growing and shrinking, the whole climate dance. So when we say oceans beneath crimson skies, it's not just poetic. It might be literal. For Mars to keep that water liquid, it must have been warmer. The sun was weaker back then, so how did the planet stay toasty enough for oceans? Well, it might have had a thick atmosphere filled with carbon dioxide, methane, and maybe even hydrogen, all greenhouse gases that trapped heat. Volcanoes could have constantly pumped out steam and gas, turning the planet into a kind of natural sauna. Imagine thick clouds glowing red from the sunlight filtering through them, and lightning flashing in the distance as warm rain splashes onto alien soil. Okay, that might sound like a heavy metal album cover, but it's also just beautiful. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. If Mars had long-lasting water, warmth, and chemistry, it had all the ingredients for life. And not just microbes, either. Over time, life could have evolved, adapted, and maybe built things. Tiny cells becoming complex organisms. Fish-like creatures swimming through crimson oceans. Maybe even land dwellers building shelter from Martian storms. We don't have fossils, but we do have meteorites, actual chunks of Mars that landed on Earth. One of them, called ALH 84001, seems to contain microscopic structures that might be fossilized bacteria. When scientists first found it, the world went nuts. The US president at the time even gave a speech about it. Then other scientists said, could be minerals. So the debate continues. But the fact that we're even having that debate says a lot. Because if life started on Mars, it might have spread here next. There's a theory called panspermia. It suggests that when asteroids hit early Mars, they blasted rocks full of microbes into space, and some of those rocks eventually crashed into early Earth. It's possible that life didn't start here. It moved here. That means we might all be Martians. Which explains why Mondays are so hard. We were never meant for this gravity. It's a wild idea, but not impossible. Every time scientists study Martian meteorites, they find traces of organic compounds, the basic ingredients of life. So when we look up at Mars, maybe we're not just looking at another planet. Maybe we're looking at our old home. Picture it now, a sunset on ancient Mars. The sky burns orange and gold. The last light shimmers across a calm red sea. Wind brushes over the water, carrying whispers of a civilization that may have watched it all fade away. Somewhere beneath that dust, maybe there's still a shell, a fossil, or a piece of art buried in time, waiting for us to find it. Mars keeps her secrets well. But as we send more rovers, more probes, and maybe one day, humans, we're slowly brushing the dust off an ancient memory. And who knows? Maybe one night, when we're exploring those old shorelines again, we'll realize that the ocean didn't just belong to Mars. It belonged to us, too, from the very beginning. Next, we'll dive into Chapter 3, Seeds of Life, how life might have begun on Mars, and maybe how it found its way here. Until then, close your eyes and imagine the sound of Martian waves under a red sky. Quiet, endless, beautiful. So far, we've seen the Mars that once had oceans, rain, and rivers carving across its rusty face. But water alone doesn't make a world alive. You need something else, something that can turn chemistry into biology. Something that can take dust and lightning and say, "Let there be life." And maybe, just maybe, that spark didn't happen here on Earth first. Maybe it started on Mars. Let's rewind about 4 billion years. The solar system was young and chaotic, basically a cosmic daycare with way too many asteroids flying around. Earth and Mars were both warm, wet, and getting smacked by space rocks daily. Each of those impacts could melt ice, spark chemical reactions, and mix the ingredients of life like a giant blender in space. Now, for life to begin, you need just a few things. Liquid water, a source of energy, and the right chemistry: carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, sulfur, the usual suspects. Mars had all of those. In fact, it might have had them before Earth did. The red planet cooled faster. It had a head start. So while Earth was still a boiling ball of lava and chaos, Mars might have already been calm enough for tiny microbes to take their first breaths. Well, if microbes could breathe. You get the idea. Here's where it gets wild, and kind of poetic. There's a theory called panspermia, which basically says, life might not have started in one place. It might have traveled. Asteroids and meteorites could have carried microscopic life between planets, like cosmic Uber rides for bacteria. And since Mars had the right conditions first, it might have been the seed planet. So when a giant rock slammed into Mars billions of years ago, chunks of it, full of dust, ice, and maybe even tiny microbes, could have been blasted into space. Some of those chunks wandered through the void. And one day, a few of them landed on a young Earth. Boom. Life begins here, thanks to Mars. It's such a strange, beautiful idea, that everything we are, everything we've ever loved or dreamed about, might have started on another world. We actually have proof that this could have happened. On Earth, scientists have found over 200 meteorites that came from Mars. We know they're Martian because of the gases trapped inside. They match the air on Mars perfectly. One of those meteorites, ALH 84001, is the famous one. It was discovered in Antarctica in 1984, and under the microscope, it showed tiny structures that looked a lot like fossilized bacteria. When NASA first announced it in the 1990s, people lost their minds. Headlines everywhere, "Life on Mars found." Then other scientists said, "Hold up, could just be mineral formations." And they're right. It's not a slam dunk proof. But the fact that the debate still rages on decades later means the mystery isn't dead. Even if it's not a smoking gun, it's at least a warm Martian rock. If life began there, What kind of life was it? Well, we're not talking aliens in flying saucers yet. Early life would have been simple, single-celled, microscopic, and probably tougher than your phone's battery after an update. These little pioneers might have lived around volcanic vents, using heat and minerals as fuel. Or maybe they floated in warm lakes, soaking up sunlight. Mars had volcanoes, sunlight, minerals, and a cozy atmosphere. Basically, the perfect test lab for biology. And here's the interesting part. We found those same building blocks on Mars today. The rovers have discovered organic molecules in Martian soil. That doesn't prove there was life, but it shows Mars was chemically ready for it. It's like walking into a kitchen and seeing flour, eggs, and sugar everywhere. Somebody was planning to bake something. Let's be honest. If two planets in the same solar system had the same ingredients, it would be weird if only one of them cooked up life. Earth and Mars are next-door neighbors. They've been swapping rocks for billions of years. So it's not a stretch to think life could have jumped the fence. In fact, some scientists say Mars might have had a better shot. It was smaller, cooled down faster, and had fewer catastrophic impacts once it stabilized. So life could have had a billion-year head start there. Imagine, while Earth was still sorting out its magma problems, Mars might have already had tiny organisms floating around, living their best microscopic lives. That's humbling. We always think of ourselves as the beginning of the story. But what if we're just chapter 2? Now here's where things get a little spiritual, in a cozy, bedtime kind of way. If we really did come from Mars, then everything, every person, every tree, every song, is part of the same cosmic family. We're not separate from the stars. We're their children. We carry ancient Martian dust in our DNA, recycled and reborn on a new world. And maybe that's why we keep staring up at the red planet. Because deep down, we're homesick. At some point, though, something went wrong on Mars. The atmosphere thinned. The water vanished. The surface froze. But that doesn't mean life ended. If it existed, it could have gone underground, hidden in ice, protected from radiation. Even now, NASA's rovers are sniffing around ancient lake beds and caves, looking for methane. And every once in a while, we do detect small puffs of it. Methane means something is cooking, geologically or biologically. And if it's biological, well, that would mean life on Mars isn't just ancient. It's current. So maybe the story of life didn't stop. Maybe it's just waiting to be found. Seeds buried deep beneath the surface, frozen for eons, dreaming of sunlight. And one day, when we finally walk on Mars for real, maybe we'll uncover those seeds, still intact, still alive in their own quiet way. Wouldn't that be something? To look into a microscope on another planet, and see your oldest relatives waving back. Hey, we wondered where you went. In our next chapter, we'll meet those imagined pioneers, the first builders. If Mars had intelligent life, who were they? What did they create? And what traces might still sleep beneath the dust? For now, close your eyes. Let the thought drift. Maybe the first heartbeat in the universe wasn't here. It was up there, under a crimson sky, where the seeds of life first bloomed. Picture it. A younger Mars, its skies glowing amber, oceans still rippling under the light of two tiny moons. Rivers winding through deep canyons. And somewhere out there, movement. Not just the flow of wind or water, but purpose, tools, shelters, signs of thought. It's a crazy idea, sure. But if life did start on Mars, Could it have evolved beyond microbes? Could there have been builders? Now, before we dive headfirst into Martian civilization conspiracy theories, let's slow down. We're not talking aliens with laser guns and perfect abs. We're talking about the slow, natural climb of evolution, like what happened here on Earth. Microbes to multicellular life, to creatures that figure out how to shape their world. If Mars had liquid water for 1 billion years or more, that's enough time for life to get creative. On Earth, it only took about 500 million years to go from tiny squishy things to things that could make tools. So, it's not impossible to imagine something similar happening up there, under those red clouds. Let's play the imagination game for a moment. What would intelligent life on Mars actually look like? Different planet, different rules. Mars has lower gravity, thinner air, and less sunlight. So maybe these beings were tall and light-boned, built for efficiency. Or maybe they were shorter and sturdier, hugging the ground to stay warm. Their skin, probably darker, to trap heat and protect from radiation. Their eyes, bigger, to soak in every bit of sunlight. And their homes, maybe carved into cliffs or built underground, where it was warmer and safer. Not flashy cities, but networks of caverns lit by bioluminescent fungi or glowing minerals. You can almost imagine them walking quietly under the surface. Not aliens, just another form of people adapted to their world. Here's the strange part. When scientists look at Mars today, they actually have spotted shapes that look suspiciously like ruins. Square outlines, straight lines. Even the famous face on Mars, a hill that, from a certain angle, looks eerily like a carved statue staring up at the sky. Now, scientists have since explained most of those as optical illusions, tricks of light and shadow. But some of them still make you squint a little, don't they? It's human nature to look for patterns. We see faces in clouds, animals in toast, entire civilizations in rock formations. Still, every illusion starts with a question. Why does it look so familiar? Maybe it's coincidence. Maybe it's just erosion. Or maybe, just maybe, those shapes are something left behind. If intelligent life ever rose on Mars, what kind of society would they have built? We can only guess, but let's imagine something humble, quiet, and practical. A people who understood that survival meant cooperation, not domination. They'd know their planet's fragile nature, its thin air, its long winters. So they'd adapt, not fight against it. They might have used geothermal vents for warmth, recycled everything, lived in tune with the rhythm of dust storms and seasons. You can picture their settlements, not gleaming metal cities, but stone and clay structures shaped by hand. Low, curved roofs to deflect wind. Circular rooms for community gatherings. Gardens lit by reflected sunlight from above. Their art might have been etched into rock faces, spirals, constellations, and symbols of water. Their music, maybe a low, haunting hum carried through tunnels. And their myths. Who knows? Maybe they, too, looked up at the night sky and wondered if there was someone else out there. Imagine that. Martians lying on their backs, staring at a blue in the distance, whispering, "I wonder if they have oceans too." Every civilization has a peak, a golden moment before things start to fall apart. For the first builders, that might have been when Mars was still thriving, its air thick, its seas alive. They could have mapped the stars, built observatories on crater rims, and learned how to read the weather from the color of the sky. They might have even begun to experiment with flight, gliders riding on thin currents, carried between cliffs. or with sound, long horns that could be heard across valleys. But progress always dances close to danger. Maybe they dug too deep. Maybe they changed their environment faster than they realized. Because eventually, Mars began to change, and not for the better. The atmosphere started thinning. Dust storms grew longer, darker. The oceans retreated, leaving behind salt flats that glittered like ghosts. For the first builders, that must have been terrifying. Imagine watching your rivers vanish, your crops fail, your children coughing in thin air. They probably tried everything, building domes, conserving water, maybe even moving underground. Some scientists actually think subsurface tunnels could still exist, not from aliens, but from ancient lava flows. Perfect hiding places. And if you had to survive a dying planet, where would you go? Exactly there, under the surface. So maybe they didn't die. Maybe they adapted one more time. We might never find stone temples or metal tools. The winds have erased too much. But the real evidence might not be on the surface at all. It could be microscopic, fossilized DNA, or strange patterns in ancient rock layers. NASA's rovers keep digging and drilling, looking for organic fingerprints. And if they ever find something, anything, that looks designed, it could rewrite everything we know. Not because we'd suddenly have proof of aliens, but because we'd realize that intelligence isn't rare. It's a natural outcome of the universe's curiosity. Maybe they never left. Maybe they became one with their planet, their bones turning to dust, their cities blending into stone. And now, when the Martian wind howls through empty valleys, it carries their echoes. The first builders might have left no monuments, no spacecraft, no selfies. But maybe they left something greater, a lesson. That life, no matter where it begins, will always try to build something that lasts. Even if it's just a memory. And who knows? Maybe one day, when we finally walk on Mars, we'll step on ancient roads without realizing it. And somewhere, buried deep beneath our boots, the first builders will whisper, "Welcome home." Next time, we'll uncover what happened when their world began to crumble. Chapter 5. Technology of the Lost. Because if Mars once had builders, they might have had inventions too. And some of those might still be waiting, frozen in time, under the red dust. So for now, close your eyes. Imagine a world of glowing caverns and quiet builders under crimson skies. A world that reminds us, creation always leaves a trace. By now, we've met the first builders, those imagined Martian pioneers who may have shaped their world long before we learned to shape ours. But if they really existed, what did they create? What kind of technology might a civilization build on a planet so different from Earth? Tonight, we dig into the red dust, searching not just for bones or fossils, but for ideas that might have once powered an entire world. Every tool starts as a problem. You get cold, you invent fire. You get hungry, you invent farming. You can't find your keys. Okay, that one's still unsolved. On Mars, the problems would have been brutal. Thin air, freezing nights, and dust storms that could last for months. So any civilization that survived there would have had to master energy. Not firewood or oil, but something constant and clean. Maybe they learned to tap into geothermal vents, the natural heat from beneath the planet's crust. Mars had plenty of volcanic activity once. Imagine vast underground chambers where steam-powered machinery, not noisy and industrial like ours, but smooth, humming, efficient. A civilization that quiet would have needed gentle technology, not flashy gadgets. Something that worked with the planet, not against it. Now, here's a fun thought. Mars' core might still be faintly warm. If the builders knew how to harness that heat, they could have powered entire cities beneath the ground. Maybe they used magnetic energy, manipulating fields we're only just learning to understand. Or maybe they found a way to turn the planet's daily temperature swings into energy, the same way some scientists today dream of harvesting heat from cold deserts. It's not wild science fiction, it's just smart engineering, millions of years ahead of us. Picture quiet tunnels lit by crystal lamps powered by magnetic coils, walls humming softly as geothermal steam vents beneath them. A technology that felt alive, warm, glowing, and perfectly silent. If they existed, I doubt the builders made shiny metal robots. Mars doesn't have much metal to spare. Instead, they might have built machines from stone, clay, or even living materials. Structures that could repair themselves, grow with the environment, or biodegrade back into dust when no longer needed. Imagine buildings that breathe, absorbing carbon dioxide during the day and releasing oxygen at night. Imagine tools woven from fibers that conduct electricity. Imagine roads that heal cracks after a storm. Sounds futuristic, right? But nature already does all that. Trees heal, crystals store energy, and coral builds cities under the sea. The builders might have learned that secret early on. The best technology isn't artificial. It's alive. Every once in a while, NASA's orbiters spot something on Mars that looks strange. Perfectly straight lines, geometric patterns, shadows that look too regular to be random. The logical explanation? Erosion, rock fractures, or tricks of light. But in the back of our minds, the storyteller part of us whispers, or something else. What if those patterns aren't accidents? What if we're seeing the skeletons of old power grids or city layouts, eroded over billions of years? After all, even on Earth, you can still see the outlines of ancient Roman roads from space. Why couldn't Mars hide something similar? Just older, quieter, and covered in red dust a mile thick. Here's a bit of fun speculation. Some researchers once noticed that the thin Martian atmosphere vibrates in odd ways. The wind hums at certain frequencies, low, almost musical tones. Now, what if, and this is purely imagination, what if that music isn't random? What if it's the echo of old machines, buried deep underground, still vibrating faintly after all this time? It's probably just the planet playing its own lonely song. But the idea that some ancient technology might still sing after millions of years? That's the kind of thought that keeps dreamers awake at night. Or, in this case, gently puts them to sleep. If they mastered their environment, maybe they didn't stop there. A curious species always looks up. We know Mars has clear skies, thinner atmosphere, fewer clouds. Perfect for stargazing. Maybe the builders built observatories carved into cliffs, tracking the motion of Earth, Venus, and the moons of Jupiter. Maybe they noticed that one tiny blue world, ours, had begun to glow just enough to catch their attention. And maybe they wondered, could life exist there too? They might have even tried to reach us, sending signals, probes, or tiny biological seeds launched into the void. If that sounds far-fetched, remember, we're doing the same thing right now. We've already sent golden records into space with songs and greetings for whoever finds them. Maybe we're just repeating what someone else did long ago. Every civilization leaves behind traces of its brilliance and its mistakes. If Mars once had advanced technology, we'd expect to find wreckage, right? Machines, debris, something solid. But billions of years of erosion can erase almost anything. Wind, dust, and radiation would grind even metal into sand. So the only things that might remain are what's buried deep. That's why missions like Perseverance and ExoMars are looking underground. They're not just searching for fossils, they're looking for architecture. Regular patterns, unusual minerals, magnetic fields that shouldn't be there. And if they find even one tiny piece that looks designed rather than random, that's game over for our understanding of "we're alone." Let's step back from the gadgets for a second. If a Martian civilization really mastered energy, balance, and adaptation, maybe their greatest invention wasn't a machine at all. Maybe it was peace. Think about it. If your planet is that fragile, you learn quickly that war and greed are just bad math. Every resource counts. Every storm matters. Maybe they learned to live without endless consumption. Maybe their entire civilization was powered by cooperation. And maybe that's why we can't find them anymore. Not because they destroyed themselves, but because they learned to blend back in, to live so closely with their world that, over time, they became indistinguishable from it. That's not a tragedy. That's evolution. Somewhere under the frozen soil of Mars, there might be relics of that lost technology. Crystals holding memory, tunnels filled with dormant light. And maybe one day, when human explorers dig deep enough, a machine will hum softly for the first time in billions of years. And it'll whisper in a language we've never heard before. "Welcome back." And wouldn't that be something? Next time, we'll follow the story into its darker turn. Chapter 6: Signs in the Dust. We'll explore the strange shapes, the myths, and the real scientific mysteries that keep us wondering if we've already found the evidence and just didn't recognize it. So for now, close your eyes. Imagine glowing tunnels, humming machines, and a civilization that learned how to live quietly in harmony with the stars. Because maybe the most advanced technology isn't about power, it's about peace. Mars is quiet. Too quiet. From a distance, it looks perfectly empty, just red deserts and shadows stretching across old craters. But sometimes, when we look closer, we see things. Patterns that don't belong. Shapes that make us squint. Lines that are too straight. And that's when the mind starts whispering. What if something was built here? What if it's still here, just buried beneath the dust? Let's start with the most famous one, the face on Mars. In 1976, NASA's Viking 1 orbiter took a photo of a hill in the region called Cydonia. And there it was, a massive rock formation that looked exactly like a human face staring back at us. Eyes, nose, mouth, the works. It even cast shadows that made it look sculpted, deliberate, almost eerie. The photo hit newspapers around the world. People lost their minds. Proof of aliens. Martian statues. Ancient gods of Mars. For a while, it felt like the universe had winked at us. Then, years later, new orbiters took sharper photos, and the face turned out to be just a pile of rocks lit by afternoon sunlight at a weird angle. No aliens. Just geology with good timing. Still, even after the explanation, people couldn't quite let it go. Because deep down, we wanted to be more. There's a scientific name for that. Pareidolia. It's the fancy way of saying our brains love to see faces, even where none exist. Clouds, toast, old walls, potatoes, you name it, we've seen faces in it. It's not madness, it's survival. Our ancestors had to spot faces quickly, friend or predator, so our brains got really good at it. So when we see a rock on Mars that looks like a statue, it's just our old instincts kicking in. But it still doesn't stop the curiosity, does it? Because here's the funny thing, even when we know it's just rocks, we still want to look again. And it's not just the face. Over the years, orbiters have spotted things on Mars that make you raise an eyebrow. Rectangular patterns, pyramid-like hills, crisscrossing lines that look like roads or walls. Some researchers, and a few very enthusiastic YouTubers, swear they see city grids, fortresses, even crashed ships. NASA says they're natural landforms, the result of erosion, ancient lava flows, and weird lighting. But there's a reason these images go viral every time. They look planned. Perfect right angles. Symmetry. You know, the kind of thing nature rarely does by accident. So maybe it's not crazy to wonder. If Mars once had builders, maybe we're just seeing the faintest outlines of their world, worn away, pixel by billions of years of wind. Let's imagine, just for a moment, that those shapes really are ruins. What would that mean? It would mean the builders' cities weren't erased, just buried. Sand and dust layered over them until they became part of the landscape. You could be looking at an ancient tower and not even know it. Because after a billion years, erosion doesn't destroy, it hides. When archaeologists on Earth dig up ancient cities, they find walls made of mud and stone completely merged with the soil. Now imagine that, but multiplied by 10 million years and a few trillion sand grains. That's Mars. Some craters on Mars have strange features inside them. Spiral ridges, perfect circles, weird mounds that look sculpted. Again, most of it can be explained scientifically. Lava, wind, sediment buildup. But once in a while, there's one that just looks off. Too deliberate. Too clean. There's a region called Elysium Planitia where one crater has a spiral hill in the center. Geologists say it's volcanic. But to the dreamers out there, it looks like a symbol, a spiral carved for the heavens to see. Could it be a coincidence? Of course. But isn't it more fun to imagine it wasn't? The real secrets of Mars probably aren't on the surface at all. They're underground, beneath the dust, where the planet still keeps its memories safe from radiation and storms. Radar scans from orbiters have already revealed caves, tunnels, and strange hollow structures beneath the crust. Some could be lava tubes, but others. Their shapes are odd, rectangular, grid-like, or layered, almost architectural. It's not proof of a civilization, but it's enough to keep scientists digging. And the next generation of Mars rovers will carry ground-penetrating radar that can see even deeper. So who knows? Maybe one day, we'll spot something that makes everyone on Earth collectively say, "Wait, that doesn't look natural." Even though the face on Mars was debunked, it never really left us. It became more than an image. It became a symbol of wonder. It reminds us that curiosity is what makes us human. That we'll always look at the stars, or in this case, rocks, and ask, could someone have been here before us? And maybe that's okay, because imagination keeps us exploring. If no one had dreamed, we'd still be staring at the sky instead of walking on the moon. So maybe it's fine to believe, even just a little bit, that the dust hides stories we haven't read yet. There's a small detail most people miss about the Martian landscape. It's noisy. Not sound noisy, radio noisy. The planet gives off strange electromagnetic signals, bursts, and pulses that scientists are still studying. Most of it is just natural, interactions between solar radiation and the thin atmosphere. But once in a while, there's a signal spike that doesn't quite fit the pattern. Again, probably nothing. But you can't help but wonder. Is it just static, or is the planet talking in a way we don't understand? Even now, rovers occasionally pick up small anomalies, repeating clicks, rhythmic vibrations. Nothing conclusive. Nothing alien. Just peculiar. Like whispers in an empty museum. The truth is, we'll never stop looking for signs of the builders. Even if science says it's just rocks, we'll still squint at every new photo and ask, but what if? Because Mars invites that kind of dreaming. It's not just a planet, it's a mirror. A place that reflects our own hopes and fears back at us. When we look at those strange shapes, maybe we're not really looking for Martians. Maybe we're looking for ourselves, proof that life always finds a way to leave a mark, even when time tries to erase it. Next time, we'll face the turning point of this cosmic story. Chapter 7, The Fall of Mars. We'll see how the red planet lost its oceans, its air, and maybe its people, and what lessons that story still holds for us today. But for now, close your eyes. Picture endless dunes under a blood-red sky, and the faint outline of a face in the sand, watching, waiting, remembering. Because sometimes, even dust can tell a story. Every great story has a moment when everything changes, when balance tips into chaos, when golden skies turn gray. For Mars, that moment came quietly, not in a single explosion or sudden disaster, but in a slow unraveling. A world that had once thrived began to fade, and maybe, just maybe, the builders watched it happen. At first, the changes must have been small. A little less rain each year. Dust storms that lasted longer than usual. Rivers running thinner, slower. If you'd been there, you probably wouldn't have noticed right away. But over centuries, maybe millennia, the air grew thinner. The nights colder. Plants would have wilted. Lakes would have cracked into dry plains. And the once blue northern ocean might have pulled back, leaving salt flats that sparkled under a pale sun. Imagine waking up one morning, walking to the edge of your city, and seeing the horizon coated in red haze instead of clouds. That's how the fall of Mars began. The real tragedy started deep within the planet, at its core. Mars used to have a magnetic field, just like Earth's. That invisible shield protected it from the sun's radiation and held onto its atmosphere. But at some point, maybe billions of years ago, the core cooled. The magnetic field weakened, then died. Without it, the solar wind, streams of charged particles from the sun, started to strip the atmosphere away. Little by little, the sky itself disappeared. You could almost imagine the builders standing outside their homes, feeling the wind sting sharper each year, watching the stars grow brighter because there was less air to blur them. When the air went, the water followed. No atmosphere meant no pressure to keep liquid water stable. The rivers boiled off into mist. The lakes froze. And the ocean, that vast, shimmering cradle of life, evaporated into space. Mars became thirsty. A world once full of rivers and rain turned into one endless drought. The builders, if they still existed, would have fought to survive, digging deeper, retreating underground, storing what little water remained in caverns and ice vaults. They probably told their children stories of the time when the sky had clouds. Maybe they even sang songs about rain, like a memory trying not to fade. With no water to shape it, the wind became the new sculptor. It carried red dust across the planet, burying everything. Cities, valleys, monuments, all swallowed by sand. The dust storms of Mars aren't gentle breezes, they can wrap the entire planet in shadow for months. It's like nature pressing reset on the surface. If you stood there during one of those storms, you'd barely see your hand in front of your face. The air would hum, static crackling around you, and the sun would vanish into a dull orange glow. And under all that chaos, the builder's world might have been quietly erased, one grain at a time. Eventually, Mars reached a point of no return. The air too thin to breathe. The pressure too weak to hold warmth. Even bacteria would have struggled to stay alive. But that doesn't mean everything ended at once. Planets don't die in a single moment, they just stop being what they were. Mars kept spinning, orbiting the sun, glowing softly in the night sky like a ghost that refuses to fade. And maybe, deep underground, the last pockets of warmth still glowed, caves where the builders huddled, using what little energy remained to keep their fires, their hearts, and their hope alive. Here's where imagination takes over again. When a civilization faces extinction, it has two choices: stay and perish, or leave. Maybe the builders tried to fix their world first. They could have built machines to warm the atmosphere, to rebuild the shield, to call back the rain. But when that failed, they might have turned their eyes upward, toward the stars they'd once studied. Maybe they sent signals into space, hoping someone, anyone, would hear them. Or maybe they went further. Maybe they left. It's wild, but some scientists and storytellers alike wonder if that's exactly what happened. That when Mars died, a few survivors escaped, not in sleek spaceships like in movies, but in small, desperate crafts powered by technology we can't imagine. They might have headed for the nearest promising world, Earth. At that time, Earth was young, wet, chaotic, but alive. And if they made it, they might have seeded it with life. Maybe not consciously. Maybe by accident, microbes clinging to their ships, dust settling into oceans. And so, without even knowing it, the builders became our ancestors. Mars didn't die. It was reborn, here. But if any stayed behind, they would have watched their world turn into a desert. Their machines falling silent. Their homes buried. The red wind howling like a song for the dead. Sometimes, when orbiters pass over certain regions, they record faint magnetic fields, tiny pockets where the old shield still hums. Almost like the planet's heartbeat, still trying to keep time long after the music stopped. It's haunting. And beautiful. Because even in its stillness, Mars reminds us that every world has a story, and every story leaves an echo. When we study Mars, we're not just learning about another planet. We're looking at a mirror of what could happen here. A reminder that climate can change, that balance can slip, that even the brightest civilizations can fall, not with a bang, but with a whisper. The builder's story, real or imagined, isn't just about loss. It's about warning. And maybe that's why Mars keeps calling to us. Not just to explore it, but to learn from it, before we repeat it. Mars still glows every night, faint, red, and distant. But maybe it's not a symbol of death. Maybe it's a lighthouse. A message across time, saying, "Don't forget. We were here once. And so are you." Next, we'll follow those who might have survived. Chapter 8, Survivors of the Collapse. We'll imagine what happened to the ones who refused to give up, and where they might be now. But for tonight, let the red planet rest. It's been through enough. Sleep well, traveler. Mars is dreaming again. After the fall of Mars, silence spread across the planet like a blanket. The skies thinned. The seas vanished. The dust settled. But maybe, just maybe, not everyone was gone. Because life, no matter where it begins, doesn't surrender easily. It hides. It adapts. It finds a way to whisper, even when it can no longer sing. And that's where our story turns to the survivors. Imagine them, the last generation of the first builders. A civilization on its knees, watching its world crumble grain by grain. They'd seen the air turn thin, the crops fade, the water dry up, and still they stayed. Because that's what people do when everything they love is falling apart. They cling to home. So maybe they dug deeper. Maybe they retreated into caverns carved by their ancestors. Underground, where the cold winds couldn't reach and traces of warmth still pulsed from Mars' heart. There, in the dark, they would have built a final refuge. A city of echoes and steam, powered by geothermal veins. A place where lights glowed softly on stone walls, and the hum of machinery sounded almost like breathing. If you listen closely to Mars, not with your ears, but with radar and seismic sensors, you can almost hear hollow spaces beneath the surface. Tunnels, caverns, maybe even entire networks. Some are natural lava tubes left over from ancient volcanoes. But others, well, some look strangely organized. NASA calls them anomalous voids. Dreamers call them evidence. If the builders survived, that's where they would have gone, beneath the dust, into the belly of the planet. Their world above might have died, but underground? It could have lived for centuries more. Down there, water could stay liquid. Air could be recycled. Plants could grow under artificial light. And maybe, in the glow of crystal lamps, children were still born, songs were still sung, and stories still told about the world that once had skies. Some storytellers call this hidden realm the Red Chambers, a mythic labyrinth of life beneath the planet's surface, vast, warm, and self-sustaining. According to the legend, and by legend, I mean my overactive imagination mixed with science, the chambers were circular cities stacked like beehives. Each chamber had its own purpose. One for food, one for light, one for water, and one for memories, a kind of library, carved into stone, holding the knowledge of an entire civilization. If those chambers ever existed, they'd still be down there, untouched, sealed, waiting for visitors who know how to listen. Maybe one day, when humans finally dig deep enough, we'll stumble into one. And for a moment, the past and the present will meet. Martian dust and human footsteps blending into one story. Even today, we found clues that something might be preserved below the Martian surface. Radar scans show layers of ice, thick, ancient, and full of secrets. That ice could hold trapped gases, old bacteria, even tiny fossils. Some scientists believe there might still be microbial life hiding there right now, deep in salty water pockets beneath the frozen crust. Little survivors. Not builders, but their smallest descendants. It's poetic, really. A civilization may vanish, but its tiniest creations keep the torch burning. But what if not everyone went underground? Some stories say a few of the builders refused to hide. They looked at the dying sky and thought, we can't save Mars, but maybe we can save ourselves. And so, they built ships. Not rockets like ours, but graceful vessels powered by magnetic force or solar sails, silent crafts that rose into the thin Martian air and vanished toward the stars. Their destination? A small blue world, glowing faintly in the distance. Earth. It's a romantic idea, I know, a little far-fetched, a little dreamy. But think about it. If life on Earth and Mars share even a hint of the same DNA, then maybe those travelers didn't just survive. Maybe they became us. So technically, we might all be the great-great-great-great-grandkids of some very determined Martians. Which explains our obsession with red dust and bad weather, right? Not all the builders would have left, though. Some would have chosen to stay behind, the caretakers, the faithful, the ones who couldn't bear to abandon their planet. Maybe they saw themselves as guardians, keeping the last lights burning, even as the world went dark. They might have left behind markers, stone carvings, magnetic beacons, encoded signals, so that one day, if their children ever returned, they'd know where home once was. And maybe that's what we've been finding all along. The strange lines, the odd signals, the anomalies that seem too deliberate. The builders' postcards from the past, drifting through time and dust. If they still exist, in any form, they're quiet now. Silent as fossils. Still as statues. But silence doesn't always mean death. Sometimes, silence means rest. Maybe the builders went into hibernation, biological or technological. Maybe they placed themselves in stasis, deep within the ice, waiting for Mars to heal. And when we finally step foot there, really step foot there, maybe we'll wake them up. Not with a loud noise, but with the soft vibration of our boots touching the same soil they once loved. And they'll open their eyes, look at us in our space suits, and say, "Ha! We told you we'd be back." Whether they lived, left, or fell asleep beneath the surface, the survivors changed everything. Because if even one life form made it through the fall, one seed, one microbe, then Mars never truly died. And maybe that's the point of this whole story. That no matter how dark things get, life keeps a spark hidden somewhere, waiting for the right moment to shine again. On Earth, we see that same resilience every day. Plants pushing through cracks in concrete, coral rebuilding after storms, people finding light after loss. Mars might just be another version of that story. A reminder that even worlds can recover. So tonight, as you drift toward sleep, imagine the red chambers glowing beneath the dust. Imagine children of the builders playing in warm tunnels, laughter echoing through stone. Imagine, maybe, one of them looking up at the ceiling and asking, "Do you think the stars remember us?" And somewhere far above, on a tiny blue planet spinning under clouds, the stars do remember, because we are their answer. Next time, we'll follow that idea further. Chapter 9, The Earth Experiment. Did those survivors really make it here? And if they did, what did they leave behind in us? Until then, rest easy. The survivors are still out there. In the dust, in the ice, and maybe in our DNA. So here we are, drifting between two worlds. Mars, the elder, scarred and sleeping. And Earth, the younger, blue and noisy, full of laughter, oceans and coffee. But what if those two stories aren't separate? What if one began the other? What if Earth isn't the first civilization, but the second experiment? Picture the last days of Mars again, storms raging, oceans boiling off into mist. A few surviving builders look up at the sky and see a glimmer of hope, a new world, still forming, still wild. They know they can't save their planet, but maybe they can save what it means to be alive. So they send something across the void, not a fleet of ships, not a grand exodus, but something smaller, smarter. Seeds. Not the kind you plant in soil, the kind you plant in space. Microscopic travelers. Spores. DNA fragments sealed in crystal shells. Tiny messengers carrying the code of life. They launch them toward the young Earth, hoping at least a few will land somewhere warm and wet. And when those fragments finally crash into our oceans, the experiment begins. Now, that's not just poetic dreaming. It's actually a scientific theory called panspermia. It suggests that life can hop from planet to planet, hitching rides on rocks and comets. And the best part? We know it's possible. Earth has already been hit by meteorites from Mars. Real, solid pieces of that planet are sitting in museums right now. Some even contain organic compounds, the building blocks of life. So maybe billions of years ago, one of those Martian rocks didn't just crash into the ocean. Maybe it planted something. And from that seed grew everything we know. Fish, trees, cats, us. If that's true, then we're not just visitors looking up at Mars. We're its children, looking home. Scientists have found something curious about DNA. It's universal. The same 4 letters build all living things. But it's also weirdly durable. It can survive incredible conditions, radiation, pressure, deep freeze. There are bacteria on Earth that can live in boiling acid, or frozen ice, or deep inside rocks. So if a few microbes from Mars were tucked safely inside meteorites, they could have survived the trip easily. And maybe, when they splashed down on Earth, they found paradise, warm water, minerals, sunlight. A new playground for ancient genes. In a way, that makes us all Martian remix tapes. Earth just added new verses. The ultimate cosmic collaboration. Now, here's a more dramatic version. Some thinkers, the storytellers and dreamers, say maybe the builders didn't just send random microbes. Maybe they designed life here. Earth, they thought, could be a backup drive for their species. A place to restart, in case home was lost. They might have coded their knowledge into the DNA itself. Not words, but patterns, instincts, imagination. That spark that makes humans look up and wonder. Maybe that's their fingerprint. Maybe that's why we dream of other worlds even when we've never left this one. Because part of us remembers. If you read old myths, something interesting pops up. Across ancient cultures, Sumerian, Mayan, Egyptian, Dogon, there are stories of gods who came from the sky and taught humanity. Now, I'm not saying ancient astronauts built the pyramids. But these myths might be echoes, distorted memories passed down over eons. Maybe not of visitors arriving, but of origins. Somewhere in our deep collective memory, maybe we carry the story of a red planet, a fall, and a journey across the stars. It's strange how many cultures describe their gods as having fiery chariots, glowing eyes, or skin the color of rust. Coincidence? Maybe. But it fits the vibe, doesn't it? Every generation of humans looks at Mars and feels something. Curiosity, longing, a weird, quiet pull. We've written stories about it since we learned to tell stories. War of the Worlds, the Martian Chronicles. The red planet has haunted our imagination for centuries. Why Mars? Why not Neptune? Or Pluto? Or a nice, friendly moon? Maybe because somewhere deep in our DNA, the red color feels familiar. Like an old photograph we can't quite remember taking. It's as if the universe keeps whispering, "You've been here before." Here's a gentle theory. Maybe the builders weren't just survivors. Maybe they were gardeners. Maybe seeding life on Earth wasn't about escape, but about continuity. Like planting a tree knowing you'll never see it grow. Like leaving behind a song for someone else to finish. They might have scattered life across several worlds, Mars, Earth, maybe even Europa or Titan, hoping that somewhere one seed would thrive. And we did. That's the kind of hope only a dying world could have, not desperation, but faith. Faith that life always finds a way. Now, billions of years later, we're the ones sending machines and probes back to Mars. We're the ones drilling into its soil, looking for fossils, ice, maybe even a trace of ourselves. It's almost poetic, isn't it? The children of Mars returning home, armed with curiosity and cameras. We call it science. But maybe, just maybe, it's instinct. Like salmon swimming upstream. Like memory calling us back to where it all began. And if this theory is true, if life began on Mars and migrated here, then the first time we find life on Mars again, it won't be alien. It'll just be family. Cousins we haven't spoken to in a few billion years. They'll probably be shy, microbes tend to be, but the reunion will be sweet. Imagine the headlines. Humans discover long-lost Martian relatives. Thanksgiving just got awkward. Whether it's science or story, real or imagined, the Earth experiment reminds us of something beautiful. That we're part of something bigger. That maybe life isn't a rare accident, but the universe's favorite hobby. That when one world falls, another rises. And when one story ends, another begins, carrying pieces of the last one forward. So maybe the question isn't, did life start on Mars? Maybe it's, how far can life go when it refuses to give up? Next time, we'll follow those echoes into legend, Chapter 10, Echoes in Human Myth. We'll trace the whispers of Mars in ancient stories, symbols, and dreams, the ways humanity might have remembered its first home without even knowing it. But for now, close your eyes. Imagine those first tiny Martian seeds drifting through space, glowing softly as they fall toward a blue world waiting below. Maybe they landed. Maybe they bloomed. And maybe one of them grew up to be you. Every culture on Earth carries stories about the sky. Stories of gods descending in fire. Of heroes born from stars. Of great floods, red suns, and vanished worlds. What if those weren't just metaphors? What if they were memories, half-forgotten dreams of another planet? Long before telescopes, people watched a tiny red light wandering among the stars. The Babylonians called it Nergal, the god of war and plague. The Greeks named it Ares. The Romans, Mars. Even then, that planet felt different. Restless, mysterious, dangerous, beautiful. They couldn't have known what it really was, but maybe they felt something. A kind of homesickness disguised as awe. It's funny, we've always looked up at that red spark and called it the bringer of war. Maybe that's projection. Maybe we remembered a world that once fought for its life. Across continents, old legends whisper about visitors from the heavens. The Dogon of Mali tell of beings from the star of Ptolo who came in glowing ships and taught knowledge of the cosmos. The Maya spoke of gods who arrived on beams of light. The Sumerians wrote about the Anunnaki, those who came from above. Some say these are coincidences, others say shared imagination. But maybe they're fragments of an older truth. Stories passed down by people whose ancestors really did come from the stars, and simply forgot which one. It's like remembering you moved as a kid, but not the address of your old house. Almost every ancient culture tells of a great flood, a deluge that wiped the world clean. Science says these could come from real local disasters, melting glaciers, rising seas. But maybe, deep down, they also echo something older. The memory of oceans vanishing on Mars. A planet once covered in water, suddenly drying up. The flood reversed, not too much water, but too little. To ancient storytellers, that loss could have transformed into a myth of cleansing, rebirth, and new beginnings, the Earth as the restart button after a cosmic drought. Look through world mythology, and you'll find a pattern. Gods that descend from the heavens bringing light, fire, or knowledge. Prometheus steals fire from the gods. Quetzalcoatl descends on a feathered serpent to bring wisdom. The Egyptian god Osiris arrives from the sky and teaches agriculture. It's almost like the same story told in 1,000 accents. Maybe the fire wasn't literal flame, maybe it was technology. Maybe knowledge wasn't just farming. Maybe it was the memory of a civilization that once lived among red deserts and thin skies. And as centuries passed, those stories blurred into myth. Truth softened into bedtime tales, just like this one. Here's something small but curious. In ancient art and ritual, red was sacred. It symbolized life, blood, and power, but also danger and destruction. From Egyptian temples to Chinese dynasties, red marked divinity. Why that color? Maybe because, somewhere deep in human memory, red meant home. The hue of the sky we lost. The color of the dust we once walked on. Every time we paint with it, wear it, worship with it, maybe we're honoring the planet that started the whole story. In some myths, there are tales of beings who built impossible cities before humanity existed. Atlantis beneath the sea. Lemuria in the mists. Shambhala hidden in the mountains. Maybe these aren't just fantasies of Earth. Maybe they're cultural echoes of the builders on Mars. Civilizations that rose, created wonders, and vanished, leaving only whispers that turned into bedtime legends. If memory could survive in DNA, perhaps imagination is how it speaks. Every night, millions of people dream of other places. Deserts, stars, flying over strange landscapes. Psychologists call it coincidence, but sometimes it feels collective, like humanity dreaming the same dream in fragments. Could dreams be the last archive of ancient experience? Could some of us now and then dream of the world we lost, the one beneath crimson skies? I like that thought. It means even sleep connects us to our oldest story. The beautiful thing about our age is that science and myth don't have to fight. They can dance. Every rover that lands on Mars, every photo it sends back, feels strangely familiar, like déjà vu on a planetary scale. We study dust samples with microscopes while poets write about homesickness for a place we've never been. Maybe both are right. Science gives us the facts. Myth gives us the feelings that facts can't explain. Together, they tell the full story. That life travels, falls, remembers, and rises again. If we really are descendants of Martian life, then the myths aren't just stories, they're genetic nostalgia. That instinct to build, to explore, to look up, it's inherited. It's the builder's voice still whispering in our bones. Keep going. Keep wondering. Don't stop at one world. Maybe that's why humans can't sit still for long. We cross oceans, climb mountains, build rockets. Because somewhere in our cosmic DNA, the line is still written. Find your way home. Someday when we finally live on Mars again, real homes, real kids, real laughter, they'll look up at Earth and invent their own myths. Stories about the blue star that sent them life. legends of ancestors who crossed the void. And in a few thousand years, maybe their children will forget the facts too. But they'll still feel the truth. That the universe is a family tree with roots in dust and branches in the stars. Next time, we'll step into the future. Chapter 11, The Archaeology of the Stars. How we're already searching for those lost traces of civilizations among the planets, and what it means to dig for the past across the cosmos. But for now, close your eyes. The old myths are still singing, stories older than language, older than memory. Stories that say, you were never alone. You were never new. You just forgot the beginning. On Earth, archaeologists dig through sand. On Mars, they dig through dust. But what if the next layer of history isn't beneath our feet? It's above us? That's the idea behind a new kind of explorer. The cosmic archaeologist. Someone who looks for ruins not of stone or bone, but of starlight. Every civilization leaves fingerprints. Broken pottery here, satellite debris there. Even now, we're littering the sky with reminders of our brief time. So if the builders really existed, or if any ancient beings once thrived in the solar system, their fingerprints might still be drifting out there. Not temples or tablets, but fragments. A probe, a signal, a pattern of light that shouldn't be there. That's what cosmic archaeology looks for. The quiet leftovers of the long gone. When scientists point radio telescopes at the sky, they're not just hoping to hear aliens say, hi. They're listening for order in the chaos. A pulse too precise. A rhythm too regular. A whisper that refuses to be random. And sometimes, they do find it. Strange bursts of radio energy called FRBs. Fast radio bursts that come and go in milliseconds. So far, they seem natural. But everyone makes our hearts beat a little faster. Because maybe, just maybe, it's the cosmic equivalent of finding an old inscription carved into a wall. If the builders had technology, it might not have survived intact. Metal rusts. Circuits crumble. But the dust remains. On asteroids and moons, scientists have found tiny metallic grains that look oddly artificial. Perfectly spherical, magnetized, sometimes hollow. They could be natural formations. Or, they could be micromachines, worn down by time until they look like sand. The universe loves mysteries like that. It gives us just enough to wonder, never enough to know. Keeps the archaeologists employed, at least. We've already seen hints on Mars. Geometric ridges, straight-edged mesas, and buried voids. But other worlds hold secrets too. Venus, under its thick clouds, shows surface patterns that look suspiciously engineered. The Moon has magnetic anomalies, tiny regions that act like ancient machinery still humming faintly. And the moons of Jupiter and Saturn hide oceans large enough to cradle entire lost biospheres. Space isn't empty. It's a museum waiting to be explored. Today's space archaeologists don't use shovels. They use lasers, drones, and telescopes the size of buildings. Orbiters scan for chemical fingerprints. Spectrometers read light like an ancient scroll. AI compares millions of images, looking for shapes that don't belong. One program, called Galaxy Zoo, lets volunteers comb through photos of galaxies to find odd structures. Spirals too perfect, rings too bright, maybe even Dyson-like megastructures. Nothing confirmed yet. But the fact that we're even looking shows how much we've changed. Once we dug in dirt. Now we dig in data. SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, used to focus on radio signals. Now it hunts for technosignatures, traces of technology anywhere in the cosmos. A strange mix of archaeology and astronomy. They look for waste heat from giant power plants, artificial gases in alien atmospheres, orbits that hint at engineered satellites. Each discovery, even a maybe, feels like brushing dust off a very old artifact. Maybe, someday, one of those artifacts will blink back. Here's the funny twist. In a few thousand years, we'll be the ancient ones. Our satellites will decay. Our cities will crumble. And one day, another species might land here and say, "Look at these strange stone rectangles. They must have worshipped rectangles." We're already leaving a trail, radio waves leaking into space, spacecraft wandering beyond the solar system. To some distant archaeologist, our signals will look like fossils of thought. So maybe cosmic archaeology isn't just about finding the past. It's about becoming part of it, gracefully. If the first builders truly existed, what would they have wanted us to find? Not weapons or blueprints, probably, but something simple. A message that could survive silence. Maybe it's encoded in the magnetic fields of Mars. Maybe in the patterns of its moon's orbits. Or maybe, and this is my favorite theory, they left their story inside the DNA that traveled here. Because biology is the most elegant storage system ever made. You can destroy monuments, but you can't erase a heartbeat. When you really think about it, archaeology, whether on Earth or in space, isn't about digging up things. It's about remembering. Remembering that someone came before us. That we're part of a line stretching back billions of years. Cosmic archaeology is just that, expanded to infinity. A reminder that even stars have histories, and even dust can tell stories. And if we ever do uncover proof of the builders, it won't make us smaller. It'll make the universe feel like home. Future missions will dig deeper, literally. Drills that melt ice on Mars. Rovers that can sniff for synthetic molecules. Orbital telescopes so sharp they can read planetary graffiti from light years away. We're already planning the first true space dig. A mission to retrieve soil from asteroids that might contain fragments of pre-Earth life. Soon, cosmic archaeology won't just be science fiction. It'll be a career path. Imagine telling your parents, "Mom, Dad, I want to be an interplanetary archaeologist." That's one report card that'll get framed. Every time we brush a little dust off Mars, or listen to a strange signal in the dark, we're asking the same ancient question. Who came before us? It's the question that built pyramids, telescopes, and bedtime stories alike. And the universe, patient as always, smiles and says, "Keep digging." Next, we'll return to the heart of the story. Chapter 12, If We Find Them. What happens to us if the search actually succeeds? How would it change everything? Religion, science, sleep. But for now, let your thoughts drift like satellites through the quiet. The stars above you aren't empty. They're archives. And every time you look up, you're already reading them. What if tomorrow morning you opened your phone, and every headline in the world said, "Life found on Mars"? Or maybe not just life. Civilization. Imagine that. An old structure under the dust. A fossilized city. A machine still humming softly after billions of years. Would we celebrate? Would we panic? Would we even believe it? Let's drift through that moment together, gently, slowly, and see what it might feel like. It starts quietly. A rover drills a little deeper than usual. A camera catches something strange. A pattern, a perfect curve, a sparkle that doesn't belong. Back on Earth, scientists squint at their monitors. At first, they think it's a glitch. Then they zoom in, and the room goes silent. The data says it's real. A material no natural process could make. A shape too precise for chance. For a moment, nobody breathes. History pauses mid-sentence. Within hours, the world knows. You and I know. Our feeds explode with theories, memes, arguments, prayers, and late-night talk shows suddenly feeling very small. Some celebrate, we're not alone. Some worry, what if they're dangerous? And some just shrug and say, well, I still have to go to work. Humanity in a nutshell. But beneath the chaos, something profound begins to stir. A quiet awe that maybe, just maybe, the universe is bigger than we thought, and more connected than we ever dared hope. The scientists go first, cautious, methodical. They'll spend years confirming what we already feel in our bones. They'll analyze the patterns, test the minerals, date the samples. They'll triple-check for contamination. And when they finally announce it, officially, it'll sound calm and careful. Evidence suggests a non-natural origin consistent with advanced design. But behind the scientific language, there'll be trembling hands and watery eyes. Because they'll know. We've found the builders. Then comes the spiritual wave. Every religion, every philosophy, every bedtime prayer will stretch to fit this new truth. Some will say, see, the universe is full of God's creations. Others will say, maybe they were the gods all along. But most people, I think, will just feel smaller, and somehow more loved. Because if the builders existed, and we're their descendants, then maybe creation isn't a miracle that happened once. Maybe it's something the cosmos keeps doing, over and over, on every world. Of course, not everyone will feel calm about it. Some governments will panic. Is it a threat? They'll ask, could there still be something alive up there? Scientists will insist the ruins are ancient, billions of years old. But fear doesn't care about carbon dating. You'll see conspiracy theories sprout faster than weeds. Somebody will say NASA's hiding alien writing. Another will claim the builders predicted TikTok. Honestly, that last one might not even be wrong. For most people, though, the discovery will hit somewhere deeper. Suddenly, every question we've ever asked about who we are and where we came from will have a new chapter. You'll look up at Mars and think, they were there. They built. They fell. And somehow, we're still carrying their story. It won't make us feel alien. It'll make us feel rooted, connected to something ancient. Like finding out your ancestors wrote poetry before fire was invented. Artists will lose their minds, in the best way. Painters will fill galleries with red and gold. Musicians will write songs called The Builder's Lament or Return to the Red Shore. Writers will pen epics about forgotten Martian kings and queens who watched their skies burn. And kids everywhere will start pointing at the stars again, saying, I want to be the one who finds the next one. That's how discovery works. It doesn't end a story, It multiplies it. Here's the strangest part, though. Finding proof of the builders won't just change science or religion. It'll change perspective. Because if we're not alone, then every war, every border, every us versus them suddenly feels tiny. We'll realize we've all been arguing on one small rock in a vast cosmic neighborhood. And maybe, just maybe, we'll calm down for a bit. Or at least, one can hope. We might still argue about who gets to name the ruins, though. Humans gonna human. What if, inside those Martian ruins, we find writing? A language? A message? What would it say? Help us. Forgive us. Or maybe something simpler, something universal. We were here. Remember us. And when that happens, you'll feel it in your chest. That soft, electric ache that says, we're part of a story far older than Earth. And you'll realize that archaeology, mythology, and bedtime wonder were never separate. They've been one and the same all along. If we do find them, really find them, I don't think it'll destroy our world. I think it'll heal it. Because we'll finally know that life isn't a rare spark. It's a chain. A torch passed from one world to the next. We'll see Mars not as dead, but as a parent resting after a long journey, and maybe, out of gratitude, we'll start taking better care of our planet, the way any child would protect a family heirloom. Years later, when humans finally walk across those ancient Martian ruins, they won't just be explorers, they'll be homecomers. And when they plant that first colony flag, it won't mean conquest, it'll mean reunion, the circle closing, the story returning to where it began. Maybe the builders aren't gone. Maybe they've just been waiting for us to wake up, to grow enough to find them again. And if that's true, then the moment we see their traces, they'll finally see us too. Next time, we'll reflect on that message. Chapter 13, Lessons from a Dead World. We'll ask what Mars and the builders can still teach us about keeping our own planet alive. But for now, let the thought settle. We might be the proof that life never truly ends, it just changes address. Every story worth telling leaves a lesson behind. And Mars, the red planet, the silent one, has more lessons than most. It's a whole world turned into a warning sign. A monument that whispers, look closely, this is what happens when balance breaks. Tonight, we listen to that whisper. Once, Mars had everything it needed: air, water, warmth, maybe even laughter. Then it lost one thing, its magnetic field, and everything else followed. Without that invisible shield, the solar wind stripped away its sky. No air, no water, no chance. A reminder that the smallest invisible things can protect the biggest visible ones. Kind of like trust in a friendship. You don't notice it until it's gone. Look at Earth. Big, blue, full of Wi-Fi, but still fragile. One thin atmosphere keeps oceans liquid and lungs working. Mars shows us how fast that can disappear. Not overnight, not in an explosion, but slowly, like a candle flickering out. So the first lesson is simple. Don't take air, warmth, or peace for granted. Protect them before you realize you can't breathe without them. If the builders were real, maybe part of their fall came from their own success. Maybe they pulled too many resources from their planet, mined too deep, warmed too fast. Sound familiar? Every civilization thinks it's the exception, that the rules of nature don't apply to us. But Mars stands there, rusty and dry, saying otherwise. It's like the universe hung a big red, "Don't repeat this" sign in the sky. And we keep scrolling past it. Classic human behavior. Mars is quiet now, so quiet that even sound travels differently. When NASA's microphones recorded the wind, it came back thin and ghostly. That's not just science, that's poetry, because silence has weight. It teaches us to listen before it's too late. When a planet stops breathing, it doesn't scream. It just goes still. Earth and Mars were once siblings, two worlds with clouds and rivers. Then they took different paths. Mars cooled. Earth kept its warmth, for now. But our CO2 levels rise, our ice melts, our storms grow stronger. Mars is a cosmic before and after photo waiting for comparison. If we keep ignoring the warning, we might not like how closely we start to resemble the after. Even in its ruin, Mars shows resilience. Frozen water still hides under its poles. Bacteria might still nap beneath the soil. Life doesn't need paradise, just possibility. That's hopeful. It means even when the world looks lost, there's still a spark. So maybe the lesson isn't just avoid collapse. Maybe it's adapt faster than collapse. Change before change forces you. The builders imagined tech wasn't noisy or wasteful. It worked with the planet, not against it. We could learn from that. Technology doesn't have to mean pollution and stress. It can mean balance, simplicity, and quiet efficiency. If the next generation of engineers thought like gardeners instead of conquerors, Earth would thank them, and your electric bill would too. Mars feels dead, but death in space is different. Nothing truly disappears, it just changes form. Mountains turn to dust. Dust becomes soil. Soil waits for water. If we ever bring life back to Mars, terraforming, seeding, planting, we won't be creating something new. We'll be finishing a sentence that planet started billions of years ago. Endings are just commas in cosmic grammar. Mars also reminds us we're not the main characters. We're one chapter in a library older than imagination. And that's freeing, actually. Because when you realize you're small, you also realize how big everything else is, how many chances there are to begin again. Humility isn't weakness, it's perspective. The kind that makes you whisper instead of shout when you look at the night sky. If the builders perished, maybe it wasn't the planet that failed first. Maybe it was cooperation. A world can survive cold, drought, even loss of air, but not division. Maybe their final lesson is this: no civilization lasts if it forgets how to care for one another. Because planets don't destroy societies, people do, and only people can save them again. NASA's rovers roll across the red plains, leaving small tracks that the wind erases in days. But the data they send back isn't just numbers. It's a conversation. Every beep, every photo, every chemical reading is Mars answering us. We ask, "What happened here?" And the planet replies, "Listen carefully. I'm still telling you." When you stand outside on a clear night and see that faint red, remember it's not just another planet. It's a reminder to appreciate this one, to breathe deeply, to look after oceans and forests, to say thank you to the air that keeps your candle burning. The universe doesn't owe us anything. Yet here we are, alive, curious, warm. That's miracle enough. Next, we'll turn that gratitude into imagination. Chapter 14, Mars Reborn. We'll dream about what happens when humanity goes back, not as conquerors, but as caretakers. But for now, close your eyes. Let the quiet lessons of a red world drift through your thoughts. Mars has already paid for its wisdom. All we have to do is listen. Every ending invites a beginning. And maybe Mars, that quiet red ghost in the sky, isn't finished after all. Maybe it's just waiting for us, its wandering children, to come home and wake it up. For decades, scientists and dreamers have imagined what it would take to make Mars alive again. They call it terraforming, turning a barren world into one that can breathe. Big word, big dream. The idea is simple. Warm the planet, thicken the air, melt the ice, and let life do the rest. Kind of like giving your frozen leftovers a second chance, just on a planetary scale. To bring back warmth, we'd need to trap more heat. Release the carbon dioxide locked in the polar caps and soil. We could use giant mirrors in orbit, reflecting sunlight down like gentle magnifying glasses. Or maybe sprinkle dark dust on the ice so it absorbs more light. As it melts, it releases gas. The air thickens. The temperature rises. It would be a slow process. Centuries, maybe. But that's fine. Planets move slowly. We're the impatient ones. And somewhere in that long thaw, the first clouds would drift again. When the warmth comes back, the ice would melt. Not all at once, but in shimmering waves. Streams would trickle through old canyons, filling ancient riverbeds that haven't seen movement in billions of years. The northern plains might become a shallow sea again. The sound of wind would change. Thicker, softer, carrying the scent of dust and ozone. You could stand there and watch Mars blush from red to gold, then maybe to green. Imagine the first drop of rain falling there again. After all this time, it wouldn't be just weather. It would be resurrection. When people talk about colonizing Mars, they often picture domes. Metal, sterile, functional. But imagine something gentler. Glass greenhouses shaped like flowers. Growing moss and small trees under filtered light. Tunnels with soft bioluminescent walls. Communities built low into valleys, using the planet's warmth instead of fighting it. A living architecture, half human, half Martian. And maybe we'd plant the same crops the builders once grew, if we ever find traces of them. Old seeds meeting new hands. One day, maybe a child will stand on the surface, not in a spacesuit, but in a breathable sky, and take the first natural breath on Mars in 4 billion years. What would that feel like? Probably cold, maybe dusty, but imagine the awe. Knowing you're breathing life into a world that once breathed you into existence. That single breath would connect everything, past, present, and everything still to come. Mars Reborn wouldn't just be a new home. It would be a classroom. It would teach us patience, because you can't rush a planet. It would teach us humility, because we're not creating life from nothing. We're continuing what was already there. And it would teach us gratitude, because for every step we take on that soil, we'll know it's sacred ground, the bones of our oldest ancestor. When we go to Mars, we won't just carry food and tools. We'll carry stories, the myths of the builders, the lessons of the fall, the hope of rebirth. We'll sing songs about red skies and lost oceans. We'll name valleys after poets and children instead of politicians. And maybe we'll keep one small plaque somewhere, not for conquest, but for apology. Something that says, "We're sorry it took us so long to come home." Even in its rebirth, Mars will stay red, just softer, touched with green and silver where life takes hold. That mix will be beautiful, a living symbol. Red for memory, green for renewal. Past and future growing together. And maybe that's what the builders wanted all along. A world that could carry both scars and gardens. Because healing doesn't erase what came before. It builds on top of it. When we finally set roots on Mars, we'll realize that the real journey wasn't about rockets or robots. It was about growing up. We'll learn that to care for another planet, we first have to care for our own. That stewardship isn't science fiction. It's the most human thing we can do. And as we terraform Mars, maybe Mars will quietly re-terraform us, make us softer, wiser, slower to destroy. Maybe, just maybe, when the first sunrise glows through a new Martian atmosphere, and the air hums again with the sound of life, somewhere deep underground, a long silent mechanism will stir. A light will flicker in an old tunnel. A crystal will warm. And a voice, long asleep, will whisper, "Welcome back." The circle complete. Reborn Mars won't be a copy of Earth. It'll be something else, a collaboration between human hands and ancient dust. It'll remind us that every world can heal, if given time and care. And maybe that's the truest kind of magic. Not spells or miracles, but patient work done with love. And maybe less paperwork than a space colony committee meeting. Next, we'll close the circle completely. Chapter 15, The Circle of Civilizations. We'll bring everything together. The builders, the fall, the rebirth, and what it means for our place in the universe. But for now, picture the horizon of a new Mars. Red dust glowing gold under the light of a rising sun. The first breath of wind carrying both memory and promise. Sleep well. The planet is dreaming again, and this time, so are we. Everything in the universe moves in circles. Stars are born, they shine, they die, and their ashes become new stars. Planets form, live, rest, and one day, maybe, rise again. Even civilizations do the same. They bloom, they burn, they fall silent, and sometimes, if they're lucky, they get another chance. The builders, the first architects of Mars, lived, created, and vanished. Their world froze, but their spark didn't. It drifted across the void, landed on Earth, and took root in a puddle, in a cell, in a heartbeat. And from that seed came everything: forests, oceans, humans, laughter, and Wi-Fi. I mean, if they only knew how it all turned out. So when we talk about returning to Mars, we're not just explorers. We're descendants retracing our family history. The circle was always waiting to close. Maybe the universe doesn't record events in books or files. Maybe it remembers through us. Every time a world rises and falls, its memories turn into matter, and that matter becomes the foundation of something new. Stars remember through starlight, planets remember through soil, and life remembers through curiosity. That's why we look up. That's why we ask, What if? Because the universe is remembering itself through our questions. If Mars was the first experiment, then Earth is the second chapter, the middle child of creation. Still learning, still messing up, still trying to balance ambition with kindness. But maybe that's the point of being the middle chapter, to learn from what came before, and prepare what comes next. One day, another world might rise from us. Maybe Europa, maybe Titan, maybe some distant exoplanet. And when that happens, we'll become the builders too. The teachers, the ancestors someone else will one day wonder about. Civilizations don't end, they transform. The builders became dust. Dust became earth. Earth built us. And we'll build what comes next. It's not tragedy, it's evolution. Every fall is just a step in a longer dance. Every silence a pause before a new song. Even if Mars never speaks again, it already said everything it needed to, in the language of creation itself. Here's something funny about space. No matter how far you go, or how fast, gravity always calls you back. Not just physical gravity, emotional gravity. We're pulled toward origins, toward meaning, toward home. Mars pulled us back, not because it's beautiful, though it is, but because it's ours, and we are its echo. When the first human footsteps touch its soil again, it won't be exploration. It'll be memory. If Mars could speak, I think it would sound tired but kind. It would say, I tried my best. Don't make my mistakes. And Earth would whisper, I'm trying, but they leave the lights on too much. The builders fall, Mars silence, Earth's rise. It's all one long story told in different voices. We're listening now. That's how we grow. Once, Mars wrote its story in stone. We write ours in data, in zeros and ones, in videos like this one, whispered as you drift to sleep. But deep down, it's the same thing, trying to make sense of our place in something endless. Someday, our words will be dust too, but maybe a billion years from now, someone will find a fossilized hard drive and hear our voices again, and they'll smile, because they'll recognize the tone. Curious, hopeful, a little lost, just like us. Maybe the true legacy of the builders isn't technology or ruins. Maybe it's empathy, that quiet, stubborn love for life itself, the drive to protect, create, and understand. It's in every painting, every invention, every song that asks, why? If we carry that spirit forward, if we treat Mars, Earth, and every world with care, then the builders never really vanished. They just evolved into us. Every night, Mars glows in our sky, a soft red dot, older than anything we can imagine. And sometimes I think, maybe when we look at Mars, Mars is looking back. Maybe both worlds recognize each other, like two old friends separated by time, smiling across the void. Because the circle of civilizations isn't about who came first. It's about who remembers. When our grandchildren grow up under two skies, one blue, one red, they'll tell bedtime stories too. But their myths will sound different. They'll talk about a world that died and lived again, about ancestors who crossed space not to escape, but to reconnect. They'll grow up believing that life isn't limited to one world, and that maybe kindness and curiosity are the true technologies of survival. That's the story worth passing on. The circle doesn't really close. It expands outward like ripples on water, like galaxies spinning forever. And we're part of it now. The next chapter in a book that never ends. If the builders could see us, I think they'd be proud. We made it through chaos, through ignorance, through fear. We learned to listen again. And most of all, we remembered. So tonight, as you drift toward sleep, imagine the circle glowing across time. Mars, Earth, and everything beyond, bound together by the same old dream, that life endures, that curiosity heals, that love, in all its quiet forms, is the one thing that survives extinction. The circle keeps turning, and we keep dreaming. Good night, traveler. You're part of the oldest story ever told, and it's still being written in the stars. And so, as the dust settles across the red deserts of Mars, we're left with more questions than answers. Did civilizations really rise and fall there, long before Earth took its first breath? Or are we just seeing our own reflection, a memory written into the stars, waiting to be remembered? Maybe we'll never truly know. But maybe that's the beauty of it. Because sometimes, mystery is the universe's way of keeping our imagination alive. Look up at the night sky tonight. See that tiny red spark among the stars? That's Mars, still watching us, silent but somehow familiar. A world that might have once looked like ours, and maybe, in some strange cosmic way, was ours. Some scientists call it coincidence. Others call it destiny. But whatever it is, one thing feels certain. Our story and Mars' story are forever connected. Like two pages in the same ancient book, one written in red dust, the other in blue water. And who knows, maybe the reason we keep trying to go there, sending rovers, rockets, and dreams, isn't about exploration at all. Maybe it's homesickness. Maybe, deep down, humanity is just trying to go home. If Mars did have civilizations before Earth, if its people walked under soft orange skies, built cities now buried under centuries of sand, then maybe we're not just their descendants. Maybe we're their continuation. The next chapter in a story too vast for one planet to hold. So, as you close your eyes tonight, imagine that you are not lying in a room on Earth, but on a warm red hillside, long ago. The sun is dimmer there, softer. The wind smells faintly of iron and rain. And in the distance, lights flicker, homes, fires, voices. People, not so different from us, looking up at the stars, and wondering if anyone is out there. The same way we do now. If civilizations existed on Mars before Earth, then maybe life isn't rare. Maybe it's inevitable. Maybe the universe itself wants to be alive, over and over, in different places at different times. And tonight, for a few quiet minutes, we've been part of that story. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If you enjoyed drifting through the mysteries of Mars, then don't stop here. There's more waiting among the stars. And remember, every planet has a story. Every story has an echo. And sometimes, if you listen closely enough, you can still hear it, even from across the stars. Good night, traveler. Until next time.